position.
So, hello and welcome to Unlocking SEO Success for B2B businesses. My name's Elliot King.
And I'm David Robinson.
So both David and I work for Mintwist, which is a business unit within finpartners.com. I'm the founder of Mintwist, full service digital marketing agency, and David is in our SEO team.
That's right, I'm an SEO specialist.
That's right. So you've got two people who hopefully know what we're talking about. If you've got any questions, please put them in the chat and we're going to come to them at the end. So this webinar is obviously about SEO in general, but we're talking specifically about B2B. So I'll just open up with a bit of a monologue, if you don't mind, David, about, in my experience, what makes SEO different for B2B businesses than B2C customers, particularly obviously from a point of view of a B2B business person or business owner. So typically a B2B business typically not always, but have a longer sales cycle. So quite often the question is, well, how can SEO be relevant for me if I've got a really long and sometimes quite complex sales cycle? We're going to be, we're not going to sort of foreshadow the answers. We're going to be addressing this in the webinar. And, the clue is that different search terms are relevant at different points in the buying journey or the sales cycle of the customer, the B2B customer. And we'll touch more on that a bit later. The other thing about B2B businesses is quite often there's no kind of direct transaction that they can affect on a website, and therefore via sort of a search term. And quite often it's about generating leads, or it might be a softer conversion like downloading white papers, joining events, this type of thing. But those are all objectives that absolutely can still be connected to an SEO project, right, David?
Absolutely, yeah, sure they can, and that's what we're talking about today.
We won't be talking about it, and then that connects really to measurement. So how are these things measured? And suffice to say, technology is developing. So what sort of tricks and tools can we use to measure those sorts of softer conversions?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. We'll be talking about analytics and Google Search Console and some of these,
and goals and all the rest of it. Okay, so that's a little bit of an introduction to B2B. We've already introduced ourselves. Let's talk about SEO. So before we get into the meat of this, so you're going to hear us refer to Google a lot, but of course Google's not the only search engine in town. More broadly, we're talking about raising visibility via search in the broadest possible sense, right, David?
Yeah. So what we're talking about here, we focus primarily on Google because, of course, as search engines go, the biggest search engine on the planet and have the market share. But what we're talking about also applies to other search engines, Bing, Yandex, DuckDuckGo, whatever you happen to be using.
Yeah, and even quite often I hear the phrase YouTube is the second biggest search engine.
It is indeed. So what we're talking about here also applies to YouTube too.
Okay, great. So visibility in the broader sense means we're not necessarily talking about mass visibility. It's like focused, targeted awareness, particularly in B2B industries, sectors. Very often our products or services in that regard are quite niche. Yeah. So it's not necessarily about getting millions of visitors. Great, if we've got millions of potential customers, we want millions of visitors. But if we've got 1,000 potential customers in our world, then getting close to 1,000 or getting some thousands of visitors is obviously brilliant for a niche targeted company like that. But in general, visibility means targeted website visitors, and obviously significantly increasing that number from the current benchmark. Yeah. And then we hope that when our website is optimized correctly, by sending relevant prospects to our website and to the right pages within that website, we then hope that they'll convert.
Absolutely, yeah.
And obviously the ultimate objective for SEO is ROI, right?
Yeah, that's a better ROI, more sales, more conversions.
Yeah, and typically, David, so we're running many tens of projects for clients all over the world. Right. What sort of time period are we able to achieve an ROI in most cases?
Yeah, in most cases we definitely are able to achieve an ROI. Of course, it depends on many different factors, budgets, business goals, and SEO takes time. I think that's quite important. It takes time to work as opposed to something that's much quicker, like paid search. But often we can achieve an ROI anywhere between 3 to 6 months. We can see some changes. 1 year to 2 years, often there's a noticeable improvement in many of the traffic metrics, and we're starting to see a great ROI from there.
Yeah, and I think the thing I love about the way your team work, and I know that customers love this as well, is that in advance, sometimes of even starting the project, because of an SEO audit that you'll run as part of the pre-sales work, you can actually show quite accurately how and when that ROI will come and what investment is needed to drive that.
That's right. Yeah. So we can get some good indicators of what kind of traffic would come.
Yeah, which is just great, isn't it? Customers out there, before you pay anything, we'll tell you how much money we can make you and how quickly it will happen. So.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So this first slide that we've got up here is talking about what search results looked like in 2020. The next slide is what they look like now in 2023. Can you talk us through, David, the main changes that are happening here?
Yeah, sure. So if we look at, let's just find the right slide. Search results in 2020, they're a lot more simple. For the most part, there are 2 to 4 paid listings, and then there's 10 blue organic links underneath. There's different pages. There's page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And of course, SEO is all about getting on the first page and whatnot. That's 2020. Fast forward to 2023, and it's just a bit more complicated when you look at the results page. There are still organic listings, there are still paid listings as well. Sometimes there are more paid listings or they're appearing in different places. Probably the biggest noticeable change is the introduction of featured snippets, which are these sort of extra content areas designed really just to, I guess, engage users and provide concise answers. Which are all over the results page. There could be some examples. These could be these frequently asked questions here, where people also ask similar questions. It could be videos with helpful tips if it's a how-to you're looking for. It could be something on a person, like a biography. It could be local things. If a search term someone's looking for is service plus location, you might see a maps pack appear. So it's a lot more complicated. SEO's become a bit more about targeting these or understanding this landscape as well. So the results have changed quite substantially. And what's also more pronounced is actually the way search works. Google have integrated a lot more AI into their search algorithm, things like Mum and Bert. So they're able to understand the context of queries and often generate dynamic results page in a way that serves users better.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So these featured snippets that you're talking about, to what extent can we get our clients to show up in these areas? Is that within the scope of an SEO project?
Definitely within the scope, and it is something we do aim for. I mean, of course, anything in SEO is not so much a guarantee, but it's a probability, and we can do certain things, and in all probability, we will be able to rank for those featured snippets. A lot of it hinges around creating good content on pages, as well as introducing things like schema onto pages, which is a special type of microdata where you can mark up pages for search engines to better understand. But that's one of the most common and simple ways of targeting these featured snippets.
Okay, great. Thanks, David. So the higher up we can appear in these search results, whether it's featured snippets or the top featured organic searches, what we're really saying is the higher up we appear, the more clicks we get, right? So this next screen, we're talking about click, CTR. Can you talk to us about what some of these numbers mean and the importance of the relative organic ranking versus the sort of click-through rate you get on the ads?
Yeah, sure. So the PPC ads, you get anywhere between sort of 1 to 2, 2.5, maybe 3% click-through rate, depending on, of course, the industry and the vertical.
So just let me stop you there. So 100 people run a search for events company in London, and we're saying that only 2 of those 100 people will click through onto the ad.
That's correct.
And an equivalent 100 people, 30 of them would click on the first organic search page. That's a really big difference, isn't it?
It's a massive difference. And with organic search, of course, just like paid, it does depend on the vertical that we're talking about. Sometimes the click-through rate is even a little bit higher than that, particularly if you can get those featured snippets, because of course they take up a disproportionate amount of space on a page. I think position 2 for SEO in organic listings is about 20-25%, position 3 less, but it's absolutely huge. Once you get into those positions, the increase in traffic, if it's the right keywords, is absolutely monumental, really.
Cool, brilliant. Okay, let's talk now about the algorithm, the fabled algorithm. You know, there's a lot of there's a lot of I guess questions about this and about how it works and is it magic and even does it really exist? So tell us about the algorithm.
Yeah. So is it magic? Probably. So take that one right off the bat. Does it exist? Sure, it does exist, because any search engine on the planet, and of course it's not just Google, there's Bing, Yandex, and all of these, as well as more internal search engines on different websites. They all have to work through a keyword that they then filter information. So they all have an algorithm in terms of how they work. Specific to the Google algorithm, it's always changing. Google release different updates each year, so things always change, and again it depends on the vertical a business is in. It also depends on the user who's searching, their history, where they are based, and all of that. But the things that are particularly important at the moment within the Google search algorithm, probably the biggest one is content. Good quality, solid, trustworthy, regularly updated content is probably the single biggest thing. Because Google is a search engine, has competitors, and they want to differentiate themselves by being the most trustworthy source of information. Other things that matter quite a lot: user experience, how useful content is, how accessible that content is, the backlinks, what other websites on the internet are pointing towards you are saying, as well as some things that I maybe think about as more like anti-ranking factors rather than ranking factors, which are things that like broken links on your site, which provide a poor user experience generally, and the things that stop you ranking. Sometimes it's as much about removing those factors as increasing the number of things that make you rank.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, particularly your point that Google's serving its consumers. It wants to rank pages and content and websites that are relevant and high quality, right? So I guess it's rewarding marketers for creating really great, relevant content that's useful to users and customers of that company even.
And there's always something about, with any algorithm, giving the algorithm what it wants.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that leads us on then to the next slide here, which is typically how an SEO project would be structured. Can you talk us about those three components? And I'm guessing it's building on what you were just talking about, giving the algorithm what it wants.
Yeah, so I guess this is, as you say, it's building on giving algorithm what it wants. Within SEO, there are many, many different factors, and it can be quite confusing sometimes to wrap your head around. To give us a kind of a working model, we tend to divide it into three areas, pillars, buckets, whatever you want to call it. One would be technical, which is the sphere here. One will be on page, one will be off-site. Sometimes these go by slightly different names. Technical is all about the technical health of your site. It's things like, is it accessible? Is it crawlable? What are the links doing? Are there broken links there? What about the code on the page? How fast and responsive is your website? On page would be more focused on the actual content of the page itself. So it might be the actual content, what it's saying. It could be the headings on the page. It could be images and videos and what's in those. It could be the tags on videos. Could potentially be things, the metadata on pages. So meta descriptions, SEO titles you may have heard of before. That all comes into that kind of on-page SEO. And you've got off-site or off-page SEO, which is more about other websites on the internet who are linking to yours, what they're saying about you, how strong those sites are, how trustworthy those sites are, and whatnot. And really, a good SEO project focuses on all of these. They all have their importance. Often the tech stuff comes first, but the rest of it does need to be focused on more of an ongoing basis. Perhaps for further clarity as well, all of these kind of have similarities with other disciplines. Like you could say technical SEO actually is similar in some ways to web development, essentially. Whereas on-page SEO probably has more in common with content marketing or copywriting. And PR. And the same with off-site, for sure.
Excellent. And so we spoke earlier on about the concepts of an audit, and that quite often happen in advance of potentially a project even starting. So would an audit cover all of these components, and how is that sort of roadmap to ROI created in the context of these three components?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So of course, in an audit, if we're looking at a site, we really need to get an understanding of where a site is now. What are the issues? What areas are stopping it ranking? but what are the areas where we could 10x the potential of the rankings as well? So we really do need to look at all of these areas and map those out to really best know what to do, because of course there can be thousands of things you could do to a website, and all of might move the needle a little bit, but with time, budgets, and all of that, we really need to think about those things that move the needle the most. So in any audit, we look at all of these areas. There's a tech audit, there's a backlink audit, there is the content audit, there's a roadmap that comes along with that.
Brilliant, thank you, David. And then obviously in the context of marketing, we're talking about businesses, companies. Many of you watching will be business leaders, marketing directors, and so on. And we all understand that there's competitors, right? So in order to get an ROI, we're either gaining market share from someone else, or we're entering a new market. SEO can help with both of those things. But the next slide then, when we talk about competitors, how are we able to benchmark these competitors? What is this data telling us? And then how can we use this data to create that roadmap to ROI that we've been talking about?
Yeah, for sure. So part of an audit is looking at the competitors, what they're doing well, what they're not doing well, and where the gaps are really that we can attack. It's really that strengths and weaknesses analysis. So of course we try to find some of the better competitors, both those which are business competitors, as well as ones that are more search engine competitors, which may not be direct business competitors, but are competing for similar keywords in the search engines. We tend to look at both, look at numerous factors. This shows some of the metrics we might look at. So DR stands for domain rating. It's a metric which one of the tools, Ahrefs, use. It's their proprietary metric. It's a score 0 to 100. So it's benchmark, it's indexed rather at 100. And it's just really the strength of a domain, mostly based on its backlink profile and a little bit its content. Of course, 100 is great. Sites like the BBC, DR is in the 90s. Other news sites might have a DR of 0 or 1. So we look at competitors' DR, we look at how many pages they have, we look at the backlinks and the referral domains. That's how many domains are linking to them, how many backlinks, and so on. The number of keywords they rank for overall, as well as potentially their traffic. So we look at all these different metrics, figure out where there are some opportunities, and we really take it from there to build that roadmap out and work at improving the SEO in those areas.
That's brilliant. So in terms of the levers that move the needle here, how important is backlinks?
Yeah, so backlinks is really, really important. And it's an often neglected area of SEO because it's somewhat harder to get your head around how it works sometimes than the other areas. But it is really important because it's a vote of confidence in some ways for Google to say that your site is important. And it helps demonstrate that you're trustworthy on a particular topic. It helps demonstrate that trust. So other sites pointing towards yours, especially if those are strong sites, trustworthy sites that have got a lot of traffic, that will massively help your SEO profile.
Excellent. So keyword research then is the next thing we're going to talk about. And I suspect that many marketers will be familiar with the term. Probably a lot of marketers would have seen keyword research data. So we're not necessarily going to show a screenshot of that here. But what I'm interested in is talk generally about keyword research, but also something we touched on right at the start here. So different search terms will be relevant at different points in the funnel.
Yep.
How does your understanding of a company's, of a company's end customer, and specifically their journey, how much understanding do you need to have in order to be able to do the keyword research properly? And then how do you build it out? And you've got an example of a financial institution here. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I think it is really, really important to understand your customers, and it's become more and more important. I mean, without properly doing that, can you do SEO? You can probably do it okay to a point, but to do really good SEO, I think understanding your customers is really important, especially in B2B. It's almost useful to perhaps do a bit of either build some bio, user personas, do a bit of user journey mapping to really get into the headspace that your potential customers might be going through. What are they thinking and feeling when they hit that pain point in life where they need your product or service? I think you've really got to understand that to realize what at that point that they need that product or service, what are they thinking? What are they typing into Google or any search engine, right? That is going to be the key terms. Once you've figured that out, it's simple enough. It's about matching the content on your site to those keywords.
Yeah, and I think the really interesting thing is there are a lot of firms out there that will be investing a lot of money through their marketing teams and marketing agencies and PR teams and comms agencies, and they will have an understanding that creating useful, relevant content is really, really important at the top of the funnel. Now, from an SEO perspective, when you go into a new client, how much content do you find lying around that's waiting there to be used as fuel for an SEO project, or versus how much of it new content do you have to create?
Yeah, again, it kind of does depend on the business, and it depends on the skill set of that business. But very often there's a lot of content, maybe some blogs that aren't properly optimized, can be linked together better, or even repurposed, bits that can be repurposed, added to content that's really out of date and needs to be updated, and content that can be chopped up a bit and used across other formats that are perhaps a bit beyond SEO, which is social media channels and whatnot. We often find that we do find stuff that can be used, and I think some of it is about leveraging the resources a business already has in place. Yeah,
I think you're making a really, really fascinating and relevant and in vogue comment there. You know, there are so many businesses now that are learning how many assets they have, you know, at their fingertips, and it's not always about creating new stuff, reusing, but also repurposing. I think is a really, really good point.
Yeah,
brilliant. Thank you. Right, EEAT. Now, can you talk to us about what this means? I suspect less people would have heard of this phrase, but it's a well-used term within, I guess, the SEO industry, right?
No, EEAT, eat, of course, not to be confused with what you're putting in your mouth and whatnot. It's all about what Google wants: good content, good, solid content. What does that actually mean? Well, generally it means content that is high quality, is created by an expert. So that might be someone who's got qualifications in that area, or it could be someone who maybe doesn't, but has a lot of experience, who has some real lived experience in the real world on that particular topic, that is posted on authoritative, strong websites, that is trustworthy, that is up to date, it's regularly updated and accessible and readable, and all of that. All of these things come into EAT, which is just one way, but quite an effective way of Google being able to separate itself really from other search engines and creating that really trustworthy content.
Thank you. So on-site content is key. It will improve organic rankings. I guess we've touched on that, but let's, before we talk about site structures and content hubs and so on, let's just refer back to technical SEO. You mentioned at the start that very often it's a project that it's a component that will come at the start of an SEO project. And what I was hearing there is that if you've optimized your site from a technical perspective, you're building on solid foundations. Can you build on that?
Yeah.
And what are the key components really when we're talking about technical SEO?
Sure. So technical SEO is lots and lots of different things, but you really do need to have that solid foundations. Otherwise, you can end up in a situation where you have the best content in the world, but it's not ranking because Google can't crawl your site properly, or they're penalizing is too much of a strong word, but they're not favoring you because your site is too difficult, too energy consuming for Google to look at. So I think having the technicals right is a solid standpoint to get right early on in the journey before you start really pumping out and churning and optimizing that content you may already have. Lots of different things come into technical SEO, probably some of the big ones. One is how fast is your site? There's these metrics called Web Vitals. You can run your site through, if you go onto Page Speed Insights, you get a sense of how fast your site is, how responsive your site is, how much layout shift there is on your site. That's really major. Any broken links or redirects are broken links, not good for user experience. Google can't crawl your site properly, so avoiding those. Or masses of redirects where perhaps maybe certain websites that a business may have where it's existed for, say, 10 years, and it might have been through migrations, and it's had different webmasters at different points, different people creating content. Things have been moved around, and often there are links going to redirects, going to further redirects, cleaning that sort of thing up. Canonicals, are those correctly set for pages? And that's a big topic area in itself.
So just for those people who don't know, what do we mean by canonicals?
Canonicals, it really tells Google what the sort of the version of that page that you want to rank on. It's quite important to avoid duplicate content issues, which can become a problem if you've got certain things on your site where perhaps you've got a certain either search filter or certain things that change the URL, and you often have similar versions of the page, but have a slightly different URL. That flags in Google as duplicate content. So canonicals are a way of avoiding that.
Thank you.
Other things, sitemaps. So is your sitemap correct? Both the XML sitemap, which is for Google's crawler, really, is it set up correctly? Are there indexable live pages in there? Are there any pages in there that really shouldn't be in there? Certain things like thank you pages shouldn't really be in a sitemap, as well as an HTML sitemap, which is a useful way to get some extra links on your site. So these are probably some of the major technical things we look at. And
just again to make sure we're covering all the bases. Some people might say, what's the problem with the thank you page being indexed on the site? But I guess it's generally going to be irrelevant to the products and service, right?
Generally, yeah. And also there's some evidence that shows if you have a thank you page in your sitemap and it's an indexable page, Google crawls the site, and every time it does, that counts as a hit within your analytics. And of course, in any measurement plan, you really want to know how many people are on your site, not going on your site, how many people are leaving a page at a certain point, so you can actually make corrections to that if needs be to achieve your goals.
Okay. And before we move on technical, you mentioned SEO migration, and I think it's something really, really important that I very often find that otherwise extremely savvy marketers might not necessarily be aware of how important a consideration it is when we're moving from an old version of the site to a new version of the site, even if it appears on the face of it to be a relatively modest redesign. So what is an SEO migration and why is it important?
Yeah, SEO migrations is where your website is changing in some substantial way. It could be moving to an entirely new domain, or it may be more similar to maybe just a few of the pages having their maybe URLs changed, or even a bit of a reskin where maybe links are changing, some of the content is moving around, but it's where there's some substantial changes happening to a website. And of course, when that happens, a process, it's best practice to put a bit of a process behind it, because it can go wrong very quickly. Often sites lose a lot of traffic, technically links break and things, or the wrong things are indexable or not indexable. So really, to be able to retain the organic traffic you have, it's really important to perhaps consult an SEO team on that. And actually, I was listening to a very interesting podcast the other day that said, people often think about when a site goes through a migration that it's organic traffic that can often be impacted, especially if you mess it up and stuff. But actually, it can affect paid traffic as well, quite substantially. That's what the most recent research shows on that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But I guess in the worst case scenario, if the SEO migration is done really badly or not done at all in some cases, then you're talking about losing potentially thousands of prospect customers.
Potentially thousands.
Really, really important.
Yeah, it's really vital to do it well, to just be able to retain your traffic. And where site migrations go well, what we often see is over a period of time afterwards, the rankings massively improve, traffic improves, which usually when you're doing a migration, there's some business need or there's some user experience need for doing that. So it does improve things if it's done correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Okay, let's talk about site structure and content hubs, which very often might be a big reason for companies looking to do site redesigns or site updates. What's the benefit here from an SEO perspective, from a getting customers engaged perspective?
Yeah, so I think it's all about structuring your content and the information on your site, really, the way that's architected in a way that makes sense for users and customers and search engines, and works for all three of those. There are different approaches to this. Probably the most current in vogue, one that works probably most effectively, is this idea of hub and spoke SEO, where you would have your main site, and within that you might have different topics. So we've got different topic areas here, A, B, and C. Let's say you're a banking business. Maybe you might have a particular topic area on business bank accounts. Another one might be business loans, and so on. And around each of those, you have sub pages linking to them, to and from them. And those subpages might be blogs, it might be evergreen content pages of some description, it could be video pages, it could be case studies, white papers, that sort of thing. But it's kind of this interlinking web, really, which tends to, we find, be most effective at getting sites to rank well.
Yeah, and I suppose the better organized a website structure is, the easier it is for users of that website, potential customers, to move around that structure and find the information that they really want. Yeah. And therefore, the more friendly it is, and therefore the higher that Google will rank it, right?
Exactly. And really, this ties, I think this is such a good point, ties in that when good SEO is done well, what it is it improves user experience. It's good UX. And as time goes on, what Google is looking to do is mimic good UX. So when we are restructuring content, we're looking to do it in a way that really works for users and it's most effective for them navigating and moving through a site.
Okay, great. So we've spoken about technical SEO, we've spoken about site structure and content. Let's have a word now about backlinks. Just remind us again what backlinks are very quickly, and then not all backlinks are the same.
No,
all backlinks are born the same or grow up the same.
No, it's not. Yeah, so backlinks is it's a great point. They're sites elsewhere on the internet that are not your site that are linking to yours in some description. They're not all equal. They're not all born equal, as it were. A less helpful is perhaps, I mean, you could say good and bad, or maybe less helpful and more helpful. Less helpful backlink sites, they might be very spammy. They might be not really relevant to you. Let's say your business is, I don't know, let's say you're a travel business and you've got crypto sites linking to you. It's probably not terribly useful. Maybe not particularly trustworthy sites. Maybe the sites that just look, when you look at them, like they've been designed to manipulate search engines. We kind of want to avoid those sites. What we look for instead is sites which in themselves are trustworthy and authoritative. So strong sites that really have a niche, they're relevant for your business, either topically relevant, or maybe they're not, but they're locally relevant for you. We look at sites that will link to yours, ideally using what we call keyword optimized anchor text. And instead of just linking to your homepage, saying your website, they'll link somewhere deeper in your navigation, maybe to a product or service page or an important blog page, with the keywords that you want to rank for, which helps Google contextualize it. That's what we really look for in a solid backlink.
Yeah, thanks, David. I think that last point's a really important one that I want to make sure everyone understands. So a link from a relevant, authoritative, high quality site is great, but it's the context of that link, isn't it? Right? We don't necessarily want a link saying our brand name going to our homepage. What sort of link should we be asking for, to the extent that's within our control?
Yeah, so links going to your homepage from authoritative sites are useful, of course. They're more useful if they're what they call do follow sites, which pass to kind of the SEO link juice. And often things like PR tends to achieve a lot of links that go to your homepage saying, click here, or your website name or your brand name. That is useful in improving things, metrics like your domain rating overall of your site and your authority of the homepage. What's really useful within SEO is where we have this deep linking, specifically mentioning your keywords, linking to those pages deeper in your navigation, which is good because the direction of Google and the internet and AI and things is the favor more in-depth, niche, specific content. And of course, what it's demonstrating is that you're the authority in that particular area.
Excellent. So a link saying best business bank account going to our client's business bank account landing page is going to be more effective at enabling that particular business to rank high for the phrase business bank account or best business bank account versus bank brand name going to the homepage. It's still valuable, but not valuable from a point of view of ranking high for that particular non-branded search term.
That's exactly it. Yeah. It's much more effective to have that keyword optimized anchor text. You could do it with those sort of just brand backlinks to your homepage, but it would take a lot longer.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much, David. So when we talk about actually building these types of links then, so what sort of tactics can we use?
Yeah, so we could do a podcast in itself almost on link building. There's so many different ways of doing it. It could be PR campaigns. That's a really useful way of generating backlinks, or it could be reaching out to journalists. There are varying different software packages and sites you can use to reach out to journalists. You need particular queries and sound bites on a particular topic. You can often get a link through that. It could be through events, talking at events or doing something at an event and getting a link from that. It could be podcasts. If you go on a podcast, your podcasts often need guests. That's a useful way of them linking back to your site. It could be guest posting. It could be where you create a really good, solid, in-depth article for someone else's site that they can put on their site and it links back to yours. There are many other strategies, but this is a few of the more major ways of achieving links.
And I suppose that this is where the overlap between SEO and content and PR becomes quite effective, because if we've got clients where we're running content marketing or PR for them, and we're running an SEO project, then we can draw down on all of those low-hanging opportunities.
Exactly, and it's about really synergizing all of these different areas together.
Brilliant. Okay, well, let's change tack a little bit now. Let's talk about what does future holds from an SEO perspective. I know you wanted to mention Bing.
Bing, yeah. Yeah, so, well, what does the future hold from an SEO perspective? I guess no one can really predict the future, but I think we can definitely say that AI is going to have a bigger place in the future. Start with Bing, as we're talking about that. So this is Bing Copilot, and Bing Copilot is part of the search engine now, where you can operate it like ChatGPT as a chatbot. In fact, it's got ChatGPT built into it. And what shows up in that is often listings, products can show up in that. So there's a piece about how we optimize better for that. But because of ChatGPT's kind of dominance in the AI, large language model generative AI space, at least for kind of text-based stuff, what we're seeing is more people are using Bing. Bing, almost historically in SEO, was seen as a bit of a laughing stock. People didn't take it very seriously, but now about 1 in 10 searches happens on Bing, which doesn't sound like that much, but it's important. That's a big piece of traffic, particularly when you're talking about thousands and thousands of potential customers, as well as it's often a little bit less competitive than some of the stuff within Google. So sometimes there are great opportunities. So we really recommend you don't neglect Bing.
Yeah. And particularly if it's trending up as well, who knows where it will be in a few years' time. So AI more generally, what do we think about that?
So I guess there's lots of different areas that we could potentially talk about here. I guess we could talk about, people using AI for different areas of SEO. That's a topic area in itself, but there's also something about how we optimize things for generative AI. And I guess this is somewhere where it's less certain, but it's very likely that creating very in-depth, solid content is going to be the way to go, whether this is for Bard or the different Google LLMs that are around or coming onto the market, whether it's for ChatGPT or Copilot, or whether it's for any other generative AI you happen to be using. I think it's important to consider this. So use things like schemas, so really mark to crawl as possible. Platform diversity, so not just having your content all in one particular format, say blog posts, having a mix of maybe there's some stuff on YouTube, maybe there's some videos, maybe there's some podcasts on there, maybe there's some white papers or case studies. And then, of course, creating that really solid, in-depth content around each. So making it created by someone who's experienced in a topic, has maybe got qualifications, it's trustworthy, it's regularly updated, it's current. These are probably some of the better strategies for optimizing for generative AI.
Yeah, so that's optimizing for visibility. I guess there's all sorts of ways, and you could probably do another whole podcast episode series on how you can use these tools to create content. But I guess that's a component, right, indirectly.
Yeah, I guess you're right. That's a component indirectly, and that's a big topic in itself. How to use SEO, how to use rather generative AI for SEO, and actually that's always changing. So probably by the time in a month's time that there'll be some new tools on the market. It's somewhat hard to keep up with just the amount of tools at the moment. But some of the more important ways people are using it is really just for help and guidance in maybe writing meta descriptions, titles, that sort of thing can be quite good there. Quite helpful for topic research. Quite helpful as well for content writing. Just the only caveat there is Google were saying, don't use AI, it's malpractice, it's black hat SEO, it's against the webmaster guidelines. They've done a bit of a U-turn. They're saying it's okay to use AI as long as it's good. There's, I guess, question marks around what good looks like. But I think the thing is, if you just use AI to generate a ton of content, it tends to be quite generic. It tends to be quite basic, quite generic. Sometimes it gets things wrong. So you really need, if you're going to do that, really fact check it. And you need someone to really add that last 20 to 30%, who is that subject matter expert, really, who can add that spice or whatever that particular topic is, can really make it unique for users rather than being just generative AI kind of generic content.
Yeah, fascinating. That's really fascinating. I think the general rule of thumb now is, how can we use AI to augment and improve what we're doing as opposed to replicate what we're doing, which is create great marketing content.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, let's talk a bit now about SEO results and what good looks like, I guess. We've spoken, I've mentioned a few times, visibility is from a discrete measurement perspective. Like, what is it? How do we measure it?
Yeah, so visibility, I suppose, is around showing up on search engines. So we talk about maybe the impressions you're getting, people that have seen your site, maybe people that have clicked onto your site, so clicked from Google or whatever search engine onto your page. That all factors into the visibility of the site. And then from there, in a measurement plan, you'd want to look at some of the other metrics, what people are actually doing on site. So that could be things like users, sessions, engagement rate, and then potentially conversions. These are all areas that we really look at within SEO. And which ones we look at specifically do actually depend a little bit on your business objectives, whether the campaign is it a branding campaign? Is it just about getting that visibility, in which case you probably want to look more at clicks and impressions, or is it more about getting people actually onto your site and drawing that traffic in, or is it about getting that traffic to convert? Because all of these will potentially require slightly different strategies and measurement plans.
Yeah. So is it fair to say that visibility is an index that's measuring the awareness, the amount of impressions, the amount of times we're showing up in search results?
That's correct. Yeah.
Right. So if we talk about visibility as the top of the funnel, so to speak, from an SEO perspective, I guess ultimately what we're looking for is clicks. And you spoke at the start of this session about click-through rates, clicks onto the site, and then we want people to take those actions, whether it's fill out sales inquiry form or download a white paper or sign up for an event or whatever it is. So how can we measure A, those clicks, and B, those actions that prospects are taking on our clients' websites?
Yeah, so this is where within the SEO, there's the doing of the SEO, there's planning what you're going to do and doing the SEO. But then, of course, there is having a solid measurement and reporting plan, which is partly important to sort of show what you're doing. And so you can sell it up the line in your own business if you need to. But it's also important that if something's not going right, you can do something about that to change that. So measuring visibility, you potentially want to look at clicks and impressions, which would be Google Search Console metrics. You'd maybe want to compare those as well with some of the things off GA4 now, which could be potentially users and sessions or some version of those two. If you're looking slightly more bottom of the funnel stuff, so you're looking more at converting traffic, you may want to look at getting that GA4 set up in a way that's actually measuring a particular action. So maybe it's a contact form fill out, maybe it's a video watch, maybe it's a white paper download or some sort of download of something, but you'd actually measure how many potential downloads you actually got, how long people are reading certain bits of content on your site. All of that's really useful just to get a sense of how much you're getting out there.
Yeah, and these sort of measurements that you're talking about, they can be achieved through Google Tag Manager and goals and site analytics, and then we can expose those via more user-friendly reports, I guess.
Yeah. So we'd really want to use Google Tag Manager to help us set up those potential the tracking in in analytics, we'd use Google Search Console as well. We may also incorporate other things in there, certain things that track ranks within SEO as well, because of course that's quite important for noticing when things are working and visibility. And then building using some sort of software like, for instance, Looker Studio. You need to be careful not to say Data Studio. It's Looker Studio now to build some sort of dashboard that's a bit more user friendly and lets you just look between reports when you need to.
Brilliant. And that measurement and reporting, I guess it's all part of the SEO service, right?
It is. Certainly it's all part of our SEO service, the way we look at it, because without that, it's very hard to know whether what you're doing is working and where you need to make those changes. So we build it all into our process.
Great stuff, David. So we've talked about awareness, we've talked about conversions. There's an interesting case study. We can talk about it because it's based on our company. So maybe you could talk to us about how SEO can positively impact brand authority.
Yeah, so for this particular one, this is working with Fin Partners, our company, of course, over a period of time. So I think this is over a period of about a year and a half or so, 2 years nearly, really focusing on the fundamentals of SEO. So those pillars, so focusing on a combination of getting it technically right, getting content good and regularly putting out trustworthy content and so on, and as well as that link building piece and that offsite piece, acquiring links. Over time, really moved the needle. There's 30% in organic visibility for the whole site, 648% for very specific keywords around public relations, and many of some really choice keywords that were very competitive moved from anywhere from position sort of 10 to position 30 when they started.
And I guess, just to interrupt, 10 to 30 means not on the first page, right?
It does.
Second page, third page.
Yeah. So much further on, where
almost zero, I guess.
Click-through rates are much lower. It's a joke in SEO, where do you hide a dead body and it's on the second page of Google? So people don't really look past the first page. Although the page thing is changing slightly, certainly in the US and now the UK, in some areas where it's not paginated through a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's kind of a load more, but I think it's still the thinking behind it still does matter, right? You still want to show up in those first 10 results, right?
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. That's not showing up on the first page. So if it's position 14, 15, 16, somewhere on the second page, if it's further back than that, third, fourth page, and so on, really getting those much higher, in some cases to position 2, 3, 4, which is absolutely massive. So that's second, third, fourth place in Google. And actually, with CBS Morning Show, which is a big major broadcaster in the US, actually found Fin for an interview based on a Google search, showing up in the Google search.
Yeah, and Fin is big in the comms world, so appearing on CBS News is certainly a big deal.
It's a big deal
for us.
indeed,
so that was a big win.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, David. Cost effectiveness and long-term benefits. There's a lot of data on this sheet, but you mentioned a couple of times, obviously SEO is we can say it's a long-term project. You can generate real results within months, right? But in order to get the maximum benefit, you need to run for a certain amount of time, right?
Yeah, it needs time to run. And this is where understanding a top-down approach to all marketing is useful. For certain business goals, perhaps SEO isn't always the right channel. Sometimes there are other things, particularly if you're looking for very quick wins and things where you may want to go with other channels. SEO takes time to work. It's more like, I think of it as going to the gym. So you do paid stuff, you turn it on and off, and that's all really, really great. But you turn it on and off now, you turn it on and off in 5 years, you're always going to have to sort of pay for that.
Yeah.
Whereas SEO is more like going to the gym, where you have to work hard initially, and it can take some time where it feels like not much is happening, which would be this graph here, where you may start the project. Maybe even you might dip a little bit in some areas in terms of traffic for a little while, but then over time that really starts to work again.
Just to build on it, because it's an important point, because quite often when we go and analyze a site, what we'll find is this might be getting a lot of visitors, but 90% of those visitors might be irrelevant. So it's almost job one is turn the focus of that site away from the irrelevant users and towards the more relevant ones. So that's I'm guessing is the dip, right, that we see occasionally.
Exactly. So sometimes what we often see is sometimes a website or a business might that the amount of aggregate total keywords they rank for may actually differ a bit, but it's usually a case where they're losing some of the less important ones, ones which are just not really appropriate. They're not bringing in useful traffic, or it's traffic that's just clicking onto the site, clicking away, which isn't really useful in any way. And actually what it is instead is about building this list of keywords that the site is ranking for that are actually useful for the business objectives. And over time, things really start to compound once the ball is rolling. And that can take a little bit of time, but the advantage of SEO is once it really is rolling, it kind of almost takes care of itself, and it can just be moved into more of a management phase, which is powerful.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Right, let's talk about takeaways then before we go into Q&A. So SEO has huge traffic potential. I guess that speaks for itself, right?
Yeah, it does. So you get that ball rolling, and first your rankings improve, then your impressions, then clicks, and then people are spending longer on your site, and then eventually you start converting, which is good for your business objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. And so a combination of on-page, off-site, and technical SEO. So, you spent time talking to us about these three components of the project. And I'm guessing the key message is that they need to happen in tandem, and they need to happen in the right order.
Yeah.
We also spoke about the SEO audits that we run to kick off a project. And those audits will show us where the gaps are, where the opportunities are. And therefore, we can build that into a work plan that will also, to a certain extent, allow us to make quite a decent, realistic prediction about how quickly we think we can go, because we will also have looked at those competitors in the way that you've touched on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So really understanding what the competitors are doing well, what they're doing less well as what your site is doing well. Because often sites will be doing certain areas quite well initially, but they're just not doing everything well. So I think there's a really important piece about just discovering where those gaps are, what's not being done very well, and where things can be improved, both to bring them up to a level where they're on a level playing field, as well as areas which are going well and can be 10x'd, which is important for meeting business goals.
Yeah, those opportunities. Okay, and we spoke briefly about SEO is changing with AI. I guess you've already spoken about that. We understand that AI is changing everything, right? The whole world is changing. SEO is changing as well. But I guess the best practices of SEO are still going to be relevant even in the AI world, right?
Yeah. So it's very much a case that use it as a tool to build your content. I mean, understand what AI is doing for the way people search as well. I think it's useful for that wider piece around marketing and understanding about the context of pages. But of course, it should definitely come down to your site still got to work properly and not be broken. Your content has still got to be good, trustworthy, authoritative, and all of that. So AI can be a tool to help you do that. It can be a co-pilot, as they all sort of brand themselves, but you can't just leave AI to make everything on the site.
Okay, and then the final point, I'll take this one, is reach out for help if you need it. My name's Elliot King, it's David Robinson. You can find us on LinkedIn, you can find us on finpartners.com or midtwist.com. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions and have a chat. Come in for coffee if you fancy, if you're in and around London.
Yeah, drop by the office, swing by, and we can have a chat.
Yeah, and if you're in Europe or the USA, don't worry, we do Zoom as well. Okay, so thanks very much. That brings us to the end of this current component, but I think we're going to drop in now for a bit of Q&A. And we're going to be joined by our colleague Shruti Saxena in a moment. Sorry, yeah.
Hi guys, can you see me?
Hi Shruti, we can see you.
Oh, awesome.
Have you got some questions for us?
Yes, I have. So I have been moderating this across platforms, and we do have some audience questions from during and before the workshop. I think so. Just to start off, the first question we have is there any AI that you would recommend to use so that I can make my website rank better for SEO?
So I guess it comes back to what you mean by use. Remember, use it as a tool rather than relying on the AI to do everything. Because I guess if you just rely on the AI to do everything, you kind of fall into that category of trying to manipulate search engines, which is what generally doesn't work well, at least anymore for SEO. if you use it as a tool, it helps you influence search engine rankings. So I guess the large language models like ChatGPT or Bard or Claude, for instance, those are all quite good. It depends what you want to do exactly. I find ChatGPT is just as easy to use for most of the things. You put the prompts in, it's quite good for sort of helping you brainstorm potential articles, potential topics, what might work well in a meta description. I'd probably stick to that tool because it's simple and the interface is pretty good.
Yeah, I know that you and the team are using the large language models to expedite some of the content creation work and some of that work. But I think what's interesting to note is that a lot of the existing SEO tools and platforms that are out there are building AI into the capabilities of those current platforms without giving away any sort of secret sauce. What are the key SEO tools that you and the team use?
Yeah, so I think the big ones are good. They all have their own particular strengths and weaknesses as well. So I think some of it at a detailed level is understanding some of these. So Ahrefs is a really good one. SEMrush, their competitors do very similar things. One is slightly better at backlinks, one is slightly better with content stuff. A rank tracking tool, so you could use advanced web rankings, you could use SEO Monitor. There are certain tools you may want to use for monitoring backlinks. Screaming Frog is a great one for understanding just the technicals of your site, how strong it is there. And there are other ones like SiteBob you can use there, but it's a good idea if you're just getting started with SEO to maybe invest in one tool, one of these tools that's pretty solid. Learn to use that most effectively and then work within that area of SEO to really focus in on that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much. That was really quite comprehensive. The next question we have is, how can you check competitors' SEO performance? I know we shared a slide on different performances across players in the sector, so I think this builds off of that.
Yeah, so I guess it's how do you spy on your competitors, right? So I guess the question, isn't it? Really the same as the way you look into your own. Minus you obviously generally wouldn't have Google Search Console and analytics and things to actually be able to check. But all of those big tools, so Ahrefs, SEMrush, SEO Monitor, do allow you to look at competitors, what they're doing well, what they're doing less well. You may want to look at the different areas. So splitting the SEO into those three kind of main areas, competitors in terms of things like their domain rating or domain authority and their backlinks. How strong are they there? You could look through the actual content on competitors' pages, go through page by page. If they're covering similar topics, how are they giving search engines what search engines want? How are they giving the algorithm what it wants? What are they saying about certain topics? Within the technicals of SEO, you can use Screaming Frog to crawl their sites as well and really get a sense of, is their site, how is it structured? Are there lots of broken links on their site, for instance? Are there any problems? How are they doing their site?
Yeah, and it's really interesting. So all of that objective data that you can get on competitors, these tools that you're mentioning, and there are a few of them out there, and they're all essentially using a similar algorithm to that which Google is using to crawl all of the sites of the universe, right? So the data's there. There's nothing sneaky or underhanded about it, right?
No. Nothing sneaky at all, and they're probably doing the same thing mostly. And of course, the lowest hanging fruit often is looking at, if you're not sure which keywords are going to be appropriate, for instance, looking at what your competitors are ranking for, working with those keywords.
Yeah, the power of competitor analysis.
Perfect. Okay, next one. If the end consumers and businesses are searching close to identical keywords, how do you recommend avoiding consumer business-driven traffic while excluding business-driven content?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question. And there's not an easy way of doing this, but I think a lot of this comes back to finding the right keywords. And it's going through those exercises of really understanding your customers and what they're searching for. I think for very broad keywords, there potentially would be some real crossover in terms of what is irrelevant traffic, what maybe just consumers are looking for, what similar businesses are looking for, and so on. There might be a bit of crossover, but targeting the long tail, that's where a query perhaps has much lower volume, but is much more specific and potentially more transactional. That's a useful way of being able to separate the two, as well as letting the algorithm do its thing. So 10 years ago, or perhaps even less than that, it was all just about keywords on the page and matching those to what people were searching. With Google's parts of its algorithm, for instance, the mum algorithm, which came into play in, I think, 2021, don't quote me on that, but it really helps understand the context of a page, can understand, what people are typing in the context that has based on user demographics, where they're potentially located and so on. And hence can understand what a user is looking for in that query intent a lot better. So if you are creating content on a particular topic that's much more in depth, that differentiates itself from what just ordinary consumers are looking for, through just the depth of content being faced to businesses, that's another useful way of being able to separate the two.
Yeah, and I guess it's really the reason why having a really good understanding of our client's business, our client's customers, their user journey, what they're asking for is so important, so we can differentiate between a really relevant user and a less relevant search.
Exactly, because it all comes, a lot of SEO all really comes down to when a customer has a need for your business, they see your ad in Google, in the organic rankings, which comes back to understanding what the keyword they'll be searching for is, and matching your content on your site to that and then ranking for it. That's really the crux of SEO.
Right, thanks, David. Right, Shriti, I think we've got time for a couple more questions.
Yes, just a couple more. This one is in two parts, but I feel this is quite a common question that people may have. So it says, the first part is, do we need to do SEO constantly? And the second part of it is, what's really the ideal time for doing annual planning for SEO?
Yeah. So do you need to do it constantly? It depends. I guess it depends. Depends on the business objectives. It tends to be more effective to do SEO on an ongoing basis. The exception would be if you're doing a site migration, which is different. Often that's a specific piece of work for a specific length of time. It's very project-based. But in general, for most websites and businesses, a kind of more retainer-based SEO, which goes on for months, tends to work better. And during that period, sometimes there are times when there's a lot going on that needs to be done during particularly busy times. And there'll be times when it's more of a management kind of thing, but it tends to work best to do SEO on a more ongoing basis. In terms of times of year that it's best to plan for this, it really depends on your business. Some businesses are very seasonal. There are certain things that are busy at certain times. Maybe you're in the travel niche where you really want to rank for specific terms at a certain time of year. Other businesses are less seasonal, so it's perhaps a little bit less important. It can be done at any point. Because of the nature of SEO, let's say you want to produce some content on a particular topic because people are looking for that at a particular time in the year, it's a good idea to sort of plan that and get that produced a couple of months in advance of that busy period, just to give Google a chance to index it and let it rank, and also distribute that content via social media or updates or whatever it happens to be, to actually give it a chance to do its work. So I guess it really depends. But if you want to understand more about what people are searching for related to your business at certain times of the year, often Google Trends is a really good place to start there, and it's a free tool as well.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I'll just add to that. I quite often say to clients and and people who I'm trying to help, that if with an SEO project, it's almost better if you can keep it running over a longer time, even if that means spending a lower amount on a monthly basis. And the reason I'll say that, if you're in a competitive industry, and most of us are, then you're always going to want to stay one step ahead of your competition. And even when I know your team's able to create amazing results, sometimes within 3 or 4 months, but then there's always the next set of keywords to go after, the next opportunity.
Yeah, that's it. I think there's some great points there, Elliot. That once things start working, you can often think, well, actually, there's new keywords to go after, there's new business opportunities. So it's a chance to grow and scale your business, of course, which is important for any business. But of course, competitors can sometimes up their game in what they're doing. So let's say you get it to a point that can, if your competitors start doing better than you, you've kind of got to match that and get better than that. And if you stop doing SEO at that point, that can be much harder to do. Or Google's algorithm changes, they release an update every couple of months. Things can change and affect the traffic substantially.
Yeah. I just think, these days, if you're creating content, if you're doing marketing, SEO is a key component of that. You wouldn't, most businesses out there wouldn't say we don't do marketing. It wouldn't make sense. So so that's that. I think the other interesting point on when is the best time of the year. I know we mentioned a couple of times we do this big audit, we come up with a work plan and a strategy. So refreshing that strategy and going back and looking again at some of the competitors. How often should people be doing that type of work, and what do we do for clients?
Yeah, so in terms of very small checks on what competitors are doing, that's kind of done on more of an ongoing monthly basis. So that is checked pretty regularly. In terms of slightly deeper dives, I would say probably at least a quarter that needs to be done in some description, checking a site technically, at least a quarter, sometimes more often if possible, and even really deeper, solid analysis, perhaps at least once a year. The exception, of course, being if there's something major that's just happened to your site, or new competitors come onto the market, for instance, you may want to do all those checks at that point as well, just to really get a handle on things, where you stand within that marketplace.
Thanks, David.
We don't have a lot of time, but we do have a few questions still left. So I'll just prioritize the one that we've heard more of, and that's basically for a small team. How do you recommend getting started with SEO?
Yeah, so I think it really comes back to creating content. Really, the crux of it is working out what keywords you want to go for and creating good content around that. That's probably the starting point for any team who's just getting started, limited resources. Find out your keywords and build some good content around that. That gives you a bit of a head start. Make sure your site is technically solid, that it's accessible, it's fast. Those things are also important. And if you've got a bit of spare time or additional bandwidth or focus, maybe look at acquiring some links, some backlinks to your site. It can also, in terms of getting started with an SEO, it can also be useful to maybe look inwardly and do a bit of an audit within your own team, where your skill set actually is. So I think the content is always going to be important, but maybe your team has got some really serious PR chops, but perhaps isn't so good with the devs type stuff, in which case go in heavy on the link building, and maybe outsource some of the technical side of it, or the opposite. Let's say you're a really techie business and actually the people looking after the marketing have actually really got a bit of an understanding and know how to code and whatnot. Maybe you want to focus on the technical side more, make sure your site is really good and fast and all of those bits, and actually outsource some of the slightly more PR link building kind of tasks.
Great answer, David. Thank you. I think we've got time for one more, haven't we, Shruti?
Yes, just one more. So this is regarding guest blog posting. And the question is, since B2B content tends to be technical, how would you approach guest blog posting for very niche products and services?
Yeah, so I think there's a piece that's about really understanding the topic, what people are covering within that topic, as well as what your customers are searching for. It's back to that, how do we create good content to a certain extent? I think that's the foundation for it. And in understanding as well, potential sites that you may want to get published on, for instance, what are they covering? What kind of article is going to work for them? So, and being able to match the two. I think spending some time really thinking about that is a solid way of approaching it. And if you're still facing roadblocks and getting to points where you're like, I don't really understand this, getting some expert advice on that really is worth its weight in gold, and potentially working with a really good team on this. So working with maybe some good copywriters, for instance, or some good PR people to really produce some solid, weighty content.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you, Shruti, and thank you everyone for watching. I'm Elliot King.
David Robinson, thank you.
Both of us work for Fin Partners. You can find out more at finpartners.com, and we'll look forward to chatting with you again next time. Bye.
Okay. Bye now.